Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Stump the DPE. As always, I'm Jim Pittman, your host, and along with me today, we've got Carl back with us. Say hi, Carl Hancock.
Hi, Carl Hancock. I'm back.
Very good. So, Carl, if you're not already subscribed to Carl, check out Fly with the Guys on YouTube and other social media. And I see Sonia just made it under the buzzer. Welcome. Glad you made it. Love the background. So I mentioned when I posted this in the Pep Talk group that this is likely to be our last episode. Maybe, maybe not. I don't want Stump the DP to be all about COVID-19. The reality is I would not have had the time to do 11 one-hour episodes if it wasn't for the pandemic. So call it a silver lining, call it an opportunity. I have certainly had a lot of fun with this. And now I'm going back to work. My official answer was May 1st, but I actually ended up doing a part of a check ride. It was actually a continuation on the 30th, and I am already booked up through next week. Apparently a lot of people still want to do check rides. So I am back on a limited basis, meaning I'm only working with flight schools and individuals that are following some specific coronavirus precautionary procedures, related to sanitary. We're wearing masks when we fly. It's a little weird, especially doing the ground sessions that way, but I want to do my part to make sure we're being responsible and be part of the solution. So my schedule is now filled up, and because this was something I was doing in my downtime, it's probably not going to happen, at least for a while. There is a chance, heaven forbid, that some experts are saying that come in the fall there could be a resurgence. Maybe as my state opens up and people start getting back to normal business, heaven forbid there's a flood of virus spreading, and maybe the powers that be have to lock us down even tighter than before. Who knows? Nobody really knows what's going to happen over the next few weeks or months. We'll play it by ear, but as of now, I'm back to doing check rides and limited flight training. So this has been good, though. We made it to episode 11, and I appreciate all of you that have been regulars or sometimers, or even those who are watching this on YouTube and catching the recordings. So that is the answer. If you guys want to talk more details about that or what I'm doing later, you can certainly put that into the question. So those of you who are here live, again, thank you. Go ahead and use the chat function in Zoom and just say that you have a question, and Carl will unmute you when we get to that point. And we'd love to have you ask the question yourself. If you have video and you'd like to share your video, that's even better. Remember, part of this is about socializing and seeing each other's smiling faces. If you don't have a microphone or your camera's shy and you want to just type your actual question into the chat, that's better than nothing. We'd still love to help answer your question. All right. So with all of that, we're going to start with RARs and go back to something that we discussed on an earlier episode, and that was episode 5. So RARs emailed me with some follow-up questions, and so I'm going to start probably out of order with what you emailed me, RARs. So let me just start with what I prepared, and then we can go back to your specific questions. And as always, I'm a loss for where my controls are. You would think by episode 11, I would have a consistent protocol here. Okay, so you guys should be seeing my screen now. And for anyone that's not familiar, who's that guy? It was episode 5. And we have these links now where you can go and just click on the blue part of the time link there. And the question was, what are the VFR weather minimums in a Class B corridor? And those of you who remember that episode, and those of you who go back and watch it, you're going to see me stumble all over myself. RARS certainly stumped me that day. And as soon as he asked the question, which was one that I did not have notice on, I had remembered there being a Class Bravo corridor in Los Angeles. So that's immediately where I went. We stumbled around on the chart. We finally figured out together that it's a special FAR and SFAR, and we never really answered his question. Thank you, RARS, for resending the question. Upon further study, when I'm not in the spotlight, well, actually what helped me was RARS found that there is a corridor in San Diego. So then I was thinking, well, maybe that's what I'm remembering, because probably what I'm going back like 20 plus years when I was doing my private instrumenter commercial. On at least a couple of those, I did the King videos. And I have these vague memories of John and Martha explaining how a VFR corridor through Class Bravo airspace is like a tunnel going through the Bravo. And we couldn't find one back on episode 5. So thank you, Rars. Actually, right here, I'm on Los Angeles. So if we zoom in just to catch you guys up, and you can go watch episode 5. But if you go to the Los Angeles TAC, terminal area chart, here I am on SkyVector. This is not a corridor. This is a special FAR right here, Los Angeles Special Flight Rules Area, okay? But if we go to San Diego, let's just go World VFR, zoom out, go down to San Diego. And now we're here. We've got a button that says San Diego TAC, which is terminal area chart. And right here, this is the trick. You see this box that has the altitudes that we're used to for Class Bravo airspace, but it's kind of weird. There's this arrow going over, and it's pointing to this sector right here. So you've got this almost triangle-shaped sector, and then you follow the arrow, and it tells you that that is Bravo from the surface to 3,300 and from 4,700 up to 10,000. In other words, between but not including 3,300 to 4,700 is a tunnel or a corridor through the Bravo. This is what I was looking for, what we were looking for back on episode 5. So thank you, Raj, for finding that. There is some additional information here about the VFR corridor and the specific procedures. And I didn't get time to watch it, or I should say I had other priorities. But in my searching, I did notice there's at least a couple of videos on YouTube. If you just search for VFR corridor San Diego, there's videos. You can probably go watch people do this. So back to the original question. What are the VFR weather minimums when you're going through the corridor? And in my searching, I was able to find, I don't know why we didn't find this back in episode 5, but it's right here in the AIM. And it's section, where are we? There's the figure numbers. So 355. Okay, it looks like I did that right. Sorry, a lot of scrolling. Yeah, 355 in the AIM. And you come down here to Part Bravo, VFR corridors. This isn't very long, so I'm just going to read it to you. Make it a little bigger. The design of a few of the first Class B airspace areas provided a corridor for the passage of uncontrolled traffic. A VFR corridor is defined as airspace through Class Bravo airspace with defined vertical and lateral boundaries in which aircraft may operate without an ATC clearance or communication with air traffic control. These corridors are in effect a hole through Class B airspace. See the figure below. A classic example would be the corridor through Los Angeles Class B airspace, which has been subsequently changed to Special Flight Rules, SFR. A corridor is surrounded on all sides by Class B airspace and does not extend down to the surface like a VFR flyway. Because of their finite lateral and vertical limits and the volume of VFR traffic using a corridor, extreme caution and vigilance must be exercised. This has been Story Time with Jim. Are you all asleep now? All right. Oh, there's one more paragraph. Because of the heavy traffic volume and the procedures necessary to efficiently manage the flow of traffic, it has not been possible to incorporate VFR corridors in the development of or modifications of Class B airspace in recent years. So I wasn't totally on a wild goose chase in episode 5. I feel a little bit better about that. 20 some years ago, I probably did watch some King videos where they did use Los Angeles as the example, because it says right here that Los Angeles used to be a corridor and now it is not. So my answer is that Los Angeles is not a corridor. It is a special VFR rule. And when you fly that procedure, you are very much in Bravo airspace. Therefore, you need to follow, and you would follow the Class Bravo VFR requirements, which is 3 miles visibility, clear of clouds. And and I may have misspoke now that I'm saying that. I hope I didn't say 1 mile visibility. That's for Class G airspace near the surface. So 3 miles visibility clear of clouds is the VFR minimums. And the corridor that we have over at San Diego, it very clearly in the definition we just read says that it is a hole in the Bravo. When you are between the altitudes of 3,300 and 4,700 in that segment, you are not in Bravo airspace. The only thing that makes sense is that it's filled in with Echo airspace. So you would have to follow Class Echo VFR minimums in there. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. If anyone finds anything additional to that, I'm always open to learning more. But thank you, Raj. That was a fun journey. And if you want to unmute and add anything or ask any follow-up questions on that, that's fine. Actually, Raj, go ahead and unmute because I don't have my email open anymore, and I need you to ask the other questions that you sent me. Do you have that?
Sounds good. Yeah. Hi, Jim.
Hello. Glad you made it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that totally makes sense now.
Yep.
So my other question was actually more of an opinion question in terms of IFR certificate training. For IFR, there are these accelerated schools you can go to, and they say that you can get IFR rated in 10 days or 12 days or something like that. And you train with them every day, and you do simulator, and maybe they even have a examiner on staff, and they'll examine you. And I was wondering, what is your opinion? Do you see this as what do you see as the pros and cons, and what has been your experience in dealing with students from such schools?
Great question. So I was just pulling up my website, and go ahead and mute yourself. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback there, Rars, or turn your speakers down, whatever's easiest. So on my website, if you go into resources and go to Jim's AOPA articles, I've written several articles for AOPA Flight School Business. This is intended to be read by flight school owners and managers. So just keep that in mind. My audience was not customers, or students or instructors. So I actually did an interview with our very own Joe Stanley. He's been on several episodes here on Stump the DPE back in June of 2018. It says 10-day instrument course. And if you go here, you can see what they're doing out there in Lake in the Hills Airport near Illinois. And there's a link to his website here. And so this is my interview with Joe Stanley. So that's just not only a nod to him, but somewhere to go for some of my opinion. But let me go ahead and answer your question. Like anything in aviation, flight training, or in life for that matter, there's good and bad, or as I prefer, effective and less effective. And a lot of people get hung up on Part 61 versus Part 141. I'm not a fan of that type of discussion, meaning you can't just polarize it into 141 good, 61 bad, or 141 effective, 61 less effective. The reality is, and I know this isn't the question you asked, but it's related. The reality is that there's effective and less effective in both 141 and 61. So I've seen good and bad in both types of training. Okay. So that being said, let's get to your question, which is accelerated. It really depends on the person's experience and preparation before going to the course. The reason I wanted to do this interview with Joe, and the reason I am promoting him and recommending him with confidence, is because he's one of the people that, like me, understands that not just anyone can show up and in 10 days be an instrument pilot. Okay, he really works hard with his clients to prepare them and to set expectations so that when they show up, they know what they're getting into. And the reality is, when we say here that it's a 10-day full immersion, I mean, you are eating, drinking, sleeping, like you have no other life for that 10 days. It is very intense. And really what Joe is doing, and he's not the only one. I mean, there's other programs in the country that do a good job with this. They're basically taking something that typically takes 2-3 months, and they're compressing it down where you're just doing it solid. There are some efficiencies with that. Anyone who trains once or twice a week, a certain percentage of your training is catching back up with what you got rusty on since the last lesson. Especially imagine, typical twice a week and you get weathered out one time, or maintenance or illness or whatever. With just one cancellation, you now have a solid week between those twice a week, lessons. So doing something like this full immersion, you don't have any chance to get rusty. So that's a benefit. The downside is just the intensity and how much work it takes and all the preparation and everything. So my recommendation for anyone would be talk to someone like Joe who does this. He's been doing it for a long time. Ask specific questions, talk about your specific situation, interview them. And the idea is that when you find one of these programs that you want to do, it's worth traveling to. This is for someone who can take a couple weeks off from work and just buckle down and get it done. And it can be extremely effective. The downside or the common complaint or negative, whatever you want to call it, that people talk negatively about these types of programs is they'll say that it's just a training for the check ride. And you're not really ready to be an instrument pilot in real life. It was really, they have this one DPE. They know exactly what the profile is going to be. They just do that profile over and over and over and over, and you take the check ride. And that is true for some places, okay? So you need to be careful. You need to talk to them about, hey, making a well-rounded pilot. There's maybe a lot of schools in the middle. They're not just trained for the check ride, and they're not just the normal training compressed, but they're kind of something in the middle. There is something to be said for getting the check ride done, qualifying, totally above board, meeting the standards. You got the ticket in your pocket, then go get your flight instructor and go places. Have some fun in the real IFR system as an IFR pilot with your instructor, or it doesn't even have to be your instructor at that point. It could be a friend who's an experienced pilot who's going to be there to help in case something unexpected happens. And certainly the first time you go in the clouds, we always recommend that, no matter how much experience you have under the hood. So that's another discussion. So not a real specific answer for you other than just focus on the fact that, like anything, there's good and bad, effective, less effective everywhere. So do your homework, read the reviews, talk to people who have gone through the program, and make sure you find one that's going to help manage those expectations. As far as red flags to watch for, I would say as you're doing your homework and shopping around, anyone who tries to make it sound like, oh, this is no big deal, just give us your money and we'll get you done in 10 days, that's a red flag. I mean, whoever you talk to, like Joe, they're going to tell you, you need to be ready to just turn your phone off for 2 weeks and, tell your family that you're in a submarine, underwater, basically, full immersion. They mean it. So make sure you're working with someone who's going to, give it to you straight. So that's
May I say something to that, Jim?
Please.
All right. So I recently made a video for my channel talking about the least expensive way to get your private pilot certificate. And in that, I actually interviewed several schools who say, hey, we can get you done in 40 hours. We can get you done in 50 hours. And one of the interesting facts I said is, or found out, is that they actually make you sign contracts, because the information and things that you're going through and that you're doing, it's really dependent on you. Yes, they can get you through that amount of time, but it is so dependent on you that you have to say, okay, we're committing to 50 hours, but I am committing to doing A, B, C, D every single day. Otherwise, I understand that it's my fault that we didn't get there. And that's very interesting, something to understand, that those 10-day things, it may not happen in 10 days. I mean, weather, it could be anything, but outside of that, it really truly is on the student to get there. And the second thing to remember is, if you're going through one of these programs and you're not being safe, it's not going to happen. You have to be safe. You have to be showing that you're competent and capable. Otherwise, you're not going to make it through them in the allotted time that they said.
Yeah, great points. Carl's actually done a couple of videos about being efficient and doing your homework, and so definitely check that out at Fly with the Guys YouTube channel. Thank you. Appreciate you chiming in on that. So,
yeah.
Anything else specific on that, Raj? All right, awesome. We'll go ahead and unmute. What's your next question there?
All right. Yeah, the next two are related to a specific airplane model, and I'm gonna share my screen.
Yep, go for it. Yep.
All right. Yeah,
I had it ready as well, but you're queued up. Go for it. Beautiful.
All right. So So this is the POH, and the question is about landing distances. So here, this table gives you general takeoff and landing distances. There are two columns here because there are different propellers that can be used in this aircraft. But that's not really relevant to the question. And you can see it gives you roll distance, air distance, and then a total distance, which is the sum of these two numbers. You can see my mouse, right?
Yes, it's working great.
All right. And one second. Yeah. And then it gives you landing distances as well. And then it says this is a standard atmosphere conditions, over 50-foot obstacle, so what you would expect. Now, on the next page, it talks about add-ons. And these specific add-ons, as it says here in the title, are for takeoff roll distances, and gives you add-ons for grass, for winds, for high temperature, etc. For the roll again, and the air distances. Now, my question is specific to landing add-ons, because there is no mentioning of that, except that landing distances that are for standard atmosphere. So I guess in practice, you could use some of these numbers and come up with a landing distance, but let's consider a checkride scenario, and you are facing the DPE, and he's giving you some condition and says, okay, can you check if this runway is long enough in these conditions? So going back to this manual, I only have this landing distance here. I have nothing else. So how would you approach this? How would you answer the checkride question, and how would you approach it in practice?
Well, to remind everyone, on a previous episode, it might have been that same episode, number 5, whatever it was, we talked about the Remos, and we talked about the fact that this is a light sport aircraft, and it's obvious that manufacturers are not required to provide as much data for a light sport as they are with other certificated aircraft. So the POHs for these airplanes, these light sports, are very thin. There's not a lot of pages. And so here's an example that we have limited data. I did find that interesting. When I glanced through this before, for whatever the question was, I thought that they had add-ons for takeoffs and landings, and you brought it back to my attention, like, nope, they don't have add-ons for the landing. So the longest published landing distance is what, 676 feet? So if we're talking about needing to be precise, we're talking about a very short runway. Probably not a public airport, okay? Every public airport I've seen has at least a couple thousand feet. So we're talking about a grass strip on a farm. You know, we're talking about a camping ground. We're talking about something that is outside the scope of what the manufacturer's required to say this airplane is even certified for. So it is accurate to kind of think of it as just like going to an altitude that's not in the book, you know, or doing anything that's not in the book. It's not a limitation, so you're allowed to do it, but you really are kind of a test pilot. So that's the way you want to think about it. And as crazy as that may sound, it wasn't that long ago, you know, I'm talking like Orville and Wilbur Wright kind of thing, where everyone was a test pilot every flight. They didn't have books, they didn't have, you know, and it's not until the FAA came along and made rules and all this kind of stuff that now we have these rules. So that's the reality. So I guess I'm agreeing with you. The information's not here. Go ahead and go to that next page again with the add-ons. And let's talk about the logic. So let's just call it 700 feet. Well, if you had any of the grass or soft surface or headwind, anything like that is only going to help you stop, I would imagine. It's drag on the landing gear. I guess you could say if it's wet grass, maybe the wheels will slide. I don't know. Certainly if it was, you know, an icy surface, you know, we don't know. You're a test pilot. So what I would hope to see on a check ride, to get to that question, is the applicant to first understand we don't have that information from the manufacturer. So until I get more experience, I'm going to stick with surfaces that are plenty long, you know, thousands of feet. I'm going to get to know this airplane. The first time I landed on grass, I'm going to go somewhere that's a prepared airstrip, and I'm going to do some flying, and I'm going to do some landings. I'm going to see how the brakes work with these tiny little tires, and I'm going to try it when the grass is short, and I'm going to try it when they're, you know, and just to have a real conservative risk management answer that's not really right or wrong. It's just that the applicant shows that they're thinking about the variables. They're thinking about the risks. We could certainly have a discussion, you know, if there's any tailwind, obviously that's going to extend your landing roll. So you wouldn't want to land with a tailwind. High density altitudes are you're going to have a higher true airspeed. That could be related to temperature and actual altitude above sea level. It would be related to that. So you're going to have a higher true airspeed, which means you have a higher touchdown speed. That's going to extend your landing roll. So were those numbers on the previous page only at sea level? Because that, I mean, that could change significantly if you go to a high altitude airport, right?
Yes, they are. It says here in the box.
So standard sea level. So, I mean, I would at least triple those numbers. And again, you're still at something, what, less than 2,000 feet. So I think that's probably the FAA's logic is, hey, these airplanes are certified. They're only, that's probably not the right word, approved. These airplanes are approved to only go a certain speed. You know, and they have to have a certain stall speed and cruise speed and all this stuff. It's like they're not going to take up that much runway, no matter how high of a density altitude. As long as this guy's not landing with a 10-knot tailwind, he's going to be able to put it on any runway that we've made. You know, it's probably what I'm just guessing. That's kind of how they looked at it. So they didn't require Remos or any of the other light sport people to give the information. So
I have something to add to that.
Yeah, go for it.
I believe with this Remos, the GX series, they have several different revisions of this POH. And you may want to check with one of those if it's still applicable. I'm not sure if newer ones or older ones, if they're all the same, if they're different of the different revisions. But I did check, and one of the newer revisions has that exact same table for landing that you saw for takeoff.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that table right there. So
okay.
Yep.
Great point. Thank you for searching for that. So
All right, I think in general the manual is not terribly good, and you would find like typos and things in it. And
that's what I was saying, is that the newer revisions and stuff, if it's still applicable, have more information, have changes, have updates and everything for those types of aircraft. I'll go ahead and I'm posting a link to the one that I found so that you can check that out.
Thank you.
Okay.
And so again, just in summary for the checkride answer, I as the DP, I would just hope that they're looking at the variables, they're thinking about it, they're being very conservative with the absence of information and until they go out and get some real life experience. So does that work?
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's great.
Very good. What you got next?
All right, the next one is about the systems questions in the same POH. Quickly get to that page. Oh, there it is. So it's about electrical system. There is some discussion here about electrical system, of having an alternator, being able to generate 250 watts. Then it gives you a rating for various equipment in the aircraft. There is this Dynon, FS, this Garmin equipment, the lights, flaps, trim, and gives you ratings for those. On the next page, there's some general guidance, and then it actually gives you some recommended battery power for the cold weather use. So this is a cold winter time. They recommend you a 16 ampere hour battery. And that's it. That's about the electrical system. Now, my question here is, how would you approach this? Generally, is battery dies, how much time do I have?
Okay, so that's a good question for any airplane, not just this Remos. So I'll make it a little more general. One observation: it seems like this document, this POH, was written by engineers instead of pilots. Because, man, that's a lot of detailed information. Wouldn't it be nice to have more information about landing distances? I'm just saying, your Remos, come on. So basically, you're saying we know how much power each of these components draws, the amperage that it's being drawn, is it okay to calculate and figure out how long you would expect to be able to operate in case of an alternator failure? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. You certainly can do that. The math is easy. Anyone who understands basics of how electricity works could do the calculation. My answer is I would caution you against even doing that calculation, because I'm afraid it would give the pilot a false sense of security. Because even though you can do the math and you might calculate that under such and such scenario, I turn off all this stuff, I'm only using these things, I've got an hour and 15 minutes of battery. That might be true. It might not be true. I'm just making up the hour 15, okay? But because batteries, I mean, you know this just from everyday life, they're not always as good as they're supposed to be. And in a real life scenario, so if this came up on a check ride, the DPE or whoever's doing the check ride should give a scenario, and it's going to be something like you're flying along on the way to your destination and an annunciation comes on saying that you have some kind of electrical problem, alternator failure, whatever. When I do scenarios like that, I'll usually tell them the end of the story is after you land, you see that your alternator belt is broken. Of course, you don't know that in flight, but I'm just letting you know you're not fixing this thing. Okay, your alternator belt broke. There's nothing you can do from the pilot seat. What are you going to do? And but I always start the scenario with realistic. What are you going to see? You're going to see a annunciation of some kind, right? Hopefully you see it. So the answer, whether IFR or VFR, the answer should be landing as soon as practical. And depending on the scenario, it might be landing as soon as possible, but usually it's land as soon as practical. And there is a difference on those definitions. But doing the math or knowing, oh, I'm good for another hour, maybe. Do you really want to bet on that? I would still go to the nearest airport, put it on the ground, and then start troubleshooting or figuring things out from there. So, you know, if it's VFR and, you know, the closest airport's 20 miles away, but your home airport's 35 miles away, maybe the pilot in command could justify, yeah, it's VFR. I know my light gun signals. It's a towered airport at home. I'm going to go ahead and take it home where I know it can get fixed. As long, I mean, it's not about the convenience. It's about the risk management. Never make a decision based on convenience. You know, maybe that closer airport's non-towered. You know, there's a lot of students there all the time. And if you do have a total electrical failure, you're going to be, you know, no radios going into a non-towered. Maybe it is safer to go to my home airport that's towered. And if I lose radios while I'm coming in, you know, I've got the tower's phone number in my phone ready to go. I've got a Bluetooth headset connected to my phone. I mean, it depends. There's all kinds of factors there. But back to my answer, I would really be cautious about doing the math on that. Is as fun of an exercise as that may be, in real life, you just can't count on it. Kind of a related side note that comes to mind, on the G1000, we do a standby battery test as part of every before start checklist. Or starting engine checklist. Somewhere in there, it's there's a battery test. On the original Cessna G1000s, it was a 20-second test. And when I received the factory training with Cessna back in the early days, they explained that the reason for that is the standby battery, and I'm holding my hands like this because it's about the size of a motorcycle battery. It's actually several cells, obviously a rechargeable battery, but they're wired in series. And when you do the test with that red switch in the Cessna, it puts a load on each cell of the battery. And it would take 20 seconds to go around the battery and make sure that every cell was healthy. The idea being that if the green light stayed on for the whole 20 seconds, you now know with confidence that the entire battery is healthy. Good information to have, especially if you're going IFR or even VFR at night, that kind of thing. The newer models, I think in 07, don't quote me on that. I just remember they made a lot of changes in 07, but the newer G1000 Cessnas, they went to a different battery, and now the checklist is a 10-second test, which, I mean, it's only 10 seconds, but trust me, when you're sitting there in Arizona in the summer, that's an important 10 seconds before you start the engine. I'm just telling you. So, and the reason is these newer batteries were able to go through and do the test in half the time. So it's only a 10-second test. And it's funny because some of the flight schools are still using checklists that have them do a 20-second test. And you know, sometimes in the debrief, I'll pull out the POH and be like, just so you know, the official for this airplane is only 10 seconds.
Smarty
Anyway,
pants.
I don't know that Remos has a test like that for the battery, but that's just an example where, you know, the reason we do that is because batteries aren't always healthy. So does that make sense? All right, cool. Go ahead and unmute there, Rars. What else you got? You were nice enough to email me, so I want to cruise through all yours real quick if we can.
I'm actually done with the list I sent to you. I have a few other standby ones, but
let's see what Carl has.
Yep.
We'll take turns. If anyone other questions have come in, Carl, how are we looking?
We don't have any other questions that come in.
I guess Rars is up then. Keep us going. So what do you got?
All right, the next one is about emergency descent. So I've been taught two procedures: no flap and full flap. Emergency descent like 45-degree bank, and if it's full flaps, then you go to the end of the white arc. If it's no flap, you go to the end of the green arc.
Is that in the Remos?
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that there's nothing in the POH. Just a guess. All right. So for other people who are watching, hey, John just popped up. How you doing, John? Or at least I just noticed that John was there. He's behind my microphone, so glad you made it. So for anyone else who's watching, most training airplanes, I don't know that that's true. A lot of training airplanes actually have something in the section 3, usually is emergency procedures, where it will give very specific configuration for emergency descents, okay? In the absence of that, you need to go to the airplane flying handbook. We're going to do that together here in a second, unless you've already done that, Rars. Did you find anything good in the airplane flying handbook by chance? If you haven't looked, let's do it together. In fact, let me just get a head start here if I can talk and click at the same time. So it's important, again, to always go back to the scenario. Whether you're practicing or whether you're on a check ride, the scenario needs to drive the decision making. It might be that you're flying along and the examiner says, oh my goodness, I see smoke, you know, simulated smoke and flames coming out of the engine. Oh wow, we're on fire. What are you gonna do? And usually the procedure is something about memory items. Let's get the fuel turned off. So pull the mixture, turn off the fuel supply, that kind of thing. And then the idea is we want to put the fire out. Usually that involves going fast. So you would definitely not want flaps in that scenario. Sometimes the scenario is you're on a cross country at 10,000 feet right over the top of an airport, and your passenger, one of your passengers seems to be having a heart attack or a stroke or something serious, and you need to lose 9 or 10,000 feet like now. You need to get this puppy down, get it on the ground, tell them to have the ambulance meet you on the runway. This is every second counts kind of thing. If that's the scenario, then the answer is you want to lose altitude as fast as possible. The planes that I fly, that means the flaps stay up. I can't think off the top of my head of any planes that I've gotten checked out in where adding flaps is a good idea, because it's too easy to overspeed the flaps. And it's better to leave the flaps up, point the nose down, take it even into the yellow arc on the airspeed, and that'll usually give you a much higher vertical descent than leaving the flap. So now that we said that, let's go to Airplane Flying Handbook. Oh, come on. And do a search, because it's been a while. I don't even remember what's in here about emergency descent. So we got the PDF open. Move my microphone wire here so I can type. And I'm just going to go Control F here on my Windows machine and type in emergency descent. And it's looking.
It'd be great if it doesn't find anything. Dang it.
Well, what the heck? Why did it do that? Searching empty weight. Is my computer like really struggling that much right now doing a Zoom meeting? Or is it because it's looking for, can you only do one word at a time in this document? That's a little weird. I don't want to search 175 times for the word emergency. There we go, 11. I just had to wait for the app to catch up. All right, so again, don't want to mute you guys. All right, let's just go through these. Here we go. Here's talking about why you're doing it. The 30 to 45 degrees of bank is all about losing the vertical component of lift. You want to bank it over so you can, get the descent going. So that's all there. I'm just scanning through here looking for something about flaps. The landing gear and flaps should be extended as recommended by the manufacturer. So that's as clear as mud. Because your manufacturer does not recommend, but it does talk about extending them there. So kind of back to the thing of talking about being a test pilot, talks about not overspeeding the flaps. What I would say is next time you're out in the practice area, whether you're by yourself or with your instructor, doesn't really matter, clear the area below you and try it both ways. Try going flaps up and 30 to 45 degrees of bank and take it up into the yellow arc. I don't know the exact speeds on the Remos, but whatever you're comfortable with, go fast and make note of your vertical speed. And then go back up, do it again with full flaps, take it up to close to the top of the white arc. Be careful not to overspeed the flaps, because as soon as you go over that, you got to squawk the airplane. So be careful, and then note your vertical speed with that. And whichever one gives you a faster descent, meaning vertical speed is greater, then now you know for that particular airplane, and because it's different. I mean, flaps are different, the wings are different. There's so many factors. You can't just say that it matters in the absence of the manufacturer recommendation. I already said most of what I've seen, it's flaps up, but the other one, let me think. Oh, the other factor is understand that you're going to have a very different radius of turn. Remember, for every given bank angle, a change in true airspeed changes your radius of turn. So if there's a scenario where you need to keep it in a tight area, that would be a reason to go ahead and drop the flaps versus going faster and having a bigger turn radius. So I don't think there's any one answer, but knowing what's in here obviously is a big part of knowing what's going on. But yeah, that doesn't give us a lot of direction to specifically answer your question. So anything else on that one?
And would you clarify this beforehand with the DP in a checkride scenario?
Yeah,
or?
absolutely. So if someone came to me with an airplane like the Remos that it was not a manufacturer recommendation, absolutely bring that up. We would have a quick similar discussion. In a pre-flight briefing, I would even be willing to say, the scenario might be we're on fire, the scenario might be a sick passenger, or something else, just to kind of give them a head start, like, okay, this is what we mean when we say emergency descent. And it'll mostly be kind of like that thing talking about the landings. Do they understand the factors involved? Are they thinking through the risk management? What we don't want is someone just rotely doing a procedure because someone or something said to do it, and they're not thinking about what's happening in the scenario or what's happening in real life. That's what you want to stay away from. So, all right, good question. That was a fun one. And you didn't email me that one, so I didn't have a heads up. So, all right, John's got to have some questions. Come on, man. He's ready to stump the DPE. Anything coming in yet, Carl?
Yeah, oh yeah, he's ready. He needs to unmute himself and he needs to go at it.
All right, John, go ahead and unmute. Take it away.
So I did the first one, and then I looked it up in the AIM, and I answered my own question.
Well, is it something that would be interesting? We can still talk about it.
Well, it was the prompt module, the VOR errors. I typically will teach or future teach a student for VOR errors with RCPLZ. So reverse sensing, cone of confusion, prompt modulation, line of sight, and zone of ambiguity. With the prompt modulation, every time I talked to people, they said it was a rotorcraft error and it didn't occur on propellers. Well, I pulled out the AIM, and 1-1-3 paragraph A, it says certain propeller revolutions or helicopter rotor speeds. So I answered my own question without needing the master.
Well, let's not get carried away with titles or anything, but no, that's good. And it brings up a related point. Let me go ahead and talk about it real quick, because I just had a debrief from a check ride yesterday. It was an instrument check ride. He passed. He did a great job. One of the things that I usually see, especially from the big flight schools, is, and we're flying a G1000 NXI. I mean, this is a brand new Piper Archer with the NXI version of the G1000, autopilot. I mean, it's just amazing. Air conditioning. I'm so spoiled with these guys. It's awesome. I know, right?
In Arizona?
Yeah, it's across the parking lot from where you're at. Those guys they're living large over there. So anyway, the usually when I say, okay, you know, you're clearing, I'm playing ATC, and I give them a clearance to intercept and track a VOR radio. And every time they switch over to what I call green needles, which on the G1000 means we're connected to a VOR. That's fine. However, Garmin designed that system, and the FAA is very clear that that system is designed and approved to be used in lieu of ground-based nav aids, meaning we can track VORs, NDBs that may still be charted, anything that we can see on a chart. We can use GPS, which is magenta needles on the G1000. And well, so let me pause there and clarify for anyone who's crawling out of their skin. During training, it's extremely important that all instrument applicants learn to track green needles, VORs, localizers, ILSs, you know, everything that comes across on green needles needs to be part of the training. They need to be comfortable with it. There are scenarios on check rides where we will simulate GPS jamming. You now lost all of the magic related to GPS. You need to be comfortable using green needles. Yes, okay, don't get me wrong. That is all very important, and those are important skills for pilots to have. I'm talking about on the check ride, when I have very clearly briefed the applicant, this is real life, get in the mindset, this is a real IFR flight, and as the evaluator, I am looking for you to do whatever you're going to do in real life as an instrument pilot, and everything is working until I tell you otherwise. And usually in the scenarios I'm doing, VOR tracking is one of the very early things in the check ride before we even shoot approaches, and everything's working. And we switch over to green needles, and if they're flying with the autopilot, which they should be, that's another thing they should be comfortable using in real life until I take it away. And the plane wanders all over the place because whatever, maybe it's the prop modulation, whatever the reason is, VORs just are not as accurate. And then they get within a couple miles of the VOR and they get in the cone of confusion. And luckily the G1000 does have some cool programming to help with that, but it still wanders more than if you just leave it in magenta needles and it'll fly the hold for you. I mean, people think it's cheating, but the reality is when you are blessed to have an airplane like that and to have avionics like that, it's not that it's cheating, it's that it's a different set of skills to be a systems manager and to fly with the autopilot and to understand the technology that you have at your fingertips. That's a different set of skills than just hand flying with a watch and a compass. Both sets of skills are important, and you need to be able to go back and forth, or what we say at the airlines is you go to different levels of automation. You know, when we're at the highest level of automation, the magic is doing everything, but there's scenarios where it makes sense to drop down a notch or two and hand fly and do things manually. And yes, you got to keep those skills sharp, but anyone who's here that's going on a check ride, my advice is keep it real. Everything's working until the evaluator says otherwise. So not quite what you were talking about, but it's an observation that those green needles are just not as accurate for a multitude of reasons. So stick with the GPS, especially a system like that. I mean, they've got dual WAS GPS. Why not, use it? So, all right. You got any others, John? You got to have more.
Oh, you literally just went through what I went through with my check ride with a guy by the name of Greg, who did my instrument check ride.
Okay.
I goes, why are you on green? You've got the disable button in magenta. Hit that. It's far. Yeah, it's.
Well, if it's the Greg I'm thinking of, I respect him very much, and he's been a mentor of mine. So
yes,
I'm glad to hear we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So, and not Greg Brown, right? He's not a DP.
No.
No,
because I don't think Greg Brown's a DP yet. So
not yet. I don't think he's planning on it. But anyway.
Yeah.
So all right, good. Carl, anything new coming in? Dan, you got to have something. Come on.
I think so. There's some chat that I wasn't quite understanding though.
You're always everyone's welcome to be here as a spectator. I don't want to give you a hard time, but no, it's all good. There's so let me think. So actually, I have my notes right here from that debrief yesterday. Let me see if there was anything else. it did feel good to get back in the cockpit after almost a month of not flying.
I went ahead and visited Jim like last week, and I could tell he was twitching a little bit, and he bought himself a little toy to fly so that he can at least say, I'm flying something.
Yep. That little drone is pretty cool. It's impressive for $18.50 or whatever I paid for it. It was less than $20, and I just fly that thing around my living room.
Pretty accurate too. He landed it on my hand.
And that was my first day. That you came over like right after I opened it. So
you know, you should do with that, Carl. You should put your wooden plane on it and see if that thing will pick it up and move it around the house.
Probably no.
Do you have that plane handy, Carl? You should do a little advertising for John's buddy. That was a cool
it's not me, it's my friend's business, but
yeah. Go ahead,
I have it mounted in my room, and I probably will take a picture eventually once my desk is cleaned up from my wife using it.
Do you remember the website, John? Does he have a website?
It's Lettercraft. I can go get one of mine off the wall and show it to you guys.
If you want to grab it, I'm just looking over these notes from that check ride yesterday. Like I said, he did a good job. He passed, but a couple things that I see as common errors. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. And we're getting close to the hour, so we'll just spend a few minutes on this. I appreciate you guys, again, being here to have fun with us. Did I close? There we go. All right. We're looking for, well, let me come back somewhere I'm familiar. You might have to turn your background off, John.
Yep.
In fact, sorry, let me stop sharing. And you can talk and it should make you full screen while I'm getting my chart ready here.
How do I stop that? Virtual background.
There you go.
And, oh, there we go. So you have small ones like this. It's literally just a Cessna with the Arizona flag imprinted on it, or you can go big. And this is the size that Carl has. This is an Aero, because this is the one I did my commercial check ride in. So I put the tail number, but Carl's, I put your solo date and location, right?
You did, and I very much appreciate that. It's fun to look at.
No, I've got a wall full of this stuff in my office to keep me motivated, because there are days where you just sit there and go, why did I choose to do this? Put myself on a guillotine financially and emotionally for this, and then you look up and go, that's why. Okay, it's fun. Let's keep going.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those things where it's a really good thing if you're an instructor. You could give your student a smaller one for a solo, and that might motivate them to get the bigger one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's awesome.
Instead of cutting your shirt, you get this to take home.
Or both.
Yeah, or both. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. All right. So you should be seeing my screen again. I just pulled up the low altitude chart, IFR low altitude. For any of you that are VFR pilots, not working on instrument yet, this is called a low altitude en route chart around the Phoenix area. And I'm just going to go through a few random things here as we finish up today's episode that I think are commonly misunderstood, or things that I find are commonly misunderstood. And one of them is looking at the minimum altitudes. Like you have the minimum off route altitudes, like this big 10 and little 6 means that in that longitude latitude box, 10,600 will give you clearance above obstacles, terrain. And everyone knows that it's 1,000-foot clearance. Unless it's mountainous terrain, then it's 2,000-foot clearance. And sometimes I'll ask, well, how do you know if it's mountainous terrain? And a lot of people have never even thought about that. I think they just think, well, is there a mountain there? But there actually is a definition. So go to Google, the official search engine of the FAA, and type in FAA mountainous terrain. There you go, it comes right up. And switch it over to Google Images, and you can see this is actually somewhere in Part 91. It's also in the AIM, Chapter 5, Section 6. And there is a definition. The shaded area is what the FAA considers mountainous terrain. And as you can see, it's basically everything west of the Rockies, except for the valley in California. I forget, is that the San Joaquin Valley or whatever that is? I don't know. But certainly here in Arizona, it's the entire state of Arizona is considered mountainous terrain. Those of you who know Phoenix, we call it the valley. It's a very wide open area between mountains. That's the whole metropolitan area of Phoenix. There's a few little hills in the middle, but for the most part, it's just a big valley. As far as the FAA is concerned, the whole state, the entire state is mountainous terrain. So that's good to know that when you're, keep the browser open, when you're looking at those minimum off-route altitudes, everywhere in Arizona, that's at least 2,000 feet of clearance. Some that are kind of fun, this is good for VFR or instrument check rides. Are there any 18,000 foot mountains in southern Arizona? I don't think so. Remember, it's not just terrain, it's also obstacles. And we've got this interesting little thing down here in our neck of the woods called the Mexican border. And there's these restricted areas. It's a little easier to see on the VFR chart. So let me go over to World VFR. And where is one here? Right here, restricted area 2312. It's a circle. It's a restricted area. You could go look it up and see the altitudes, but there's also a note right here. Caution, unmarked balloon on cable to 15,000 feet MSL. That's a very long cable. And what, 3 miles? So they have to figure if the wind's blowing hard, that balloon's gonna move around. And so they have a restricted area here because it would be bad to fly your airplane through a cable. But what do you think that's for? Well, border patrol. So all periodically along the Mexican border here, we've got these restricted areas that go up to 15,000 feet. So you can see here on the VFR chart, they add 200 feet as a buffer, and that's the minimum safe altitude. So let's see, what do we call that? MEF, minimum elevation, maximum.
Maximum elevation figure.
Maximum elevation figure, there you go. I wasn't even primed to talk about that. And then you go back to the low altitude chart, and sure enough, they're giving you the 2,000 feet plus some. You know, it's a minimum of 2,000 feet clearance there, and we had the other one over here, somewhere around here, there's another one. So not really a gotcha question, but it's a quick way to figure out if someone's paid it, looked around their chart and asked their instructor, like, what's that? So I guess the biggest thing I would recommend students get from this exercise is look at your charts. Don't just look at what your videos say to look at or what your instructor points out. Take the time, have the self-discipline to look at the charts, look at the books, and this is a really good place to talk about something else that I'm passionate about, and that is how an applicant knows if they're studying enough. Carl's heard this chat before because I was his instructor for private pilot. So what I teach my clients is, it's different for everybody. Okay, we all know different people learn at different paces. But as a measuring stick, I tell my clients, every time you see me, you should have 2 or 3 questions, minimum. 2 or 3 questions to ask me. If you don't have 2 or 3 questions every time you see me, you're not studying enough. And I emphasize they don't have to be big, deep, thoughtful questions. It could be something as simple as, hey, Jim, I was looking at this chart and this 18,000 foot elevation jumped out at me. I think it's because of this restricted area. Is it something more than that? What's going on here? Like, nope, you're right. You're on the right track. Boom. That's one. What's another question? So that's a measuring stick. And I recommend you instructors that are watching this, use that. Give your students, your clients a goal like that. I think 2 or 3 questions for people who are training regularly, that seems to be a good number. And I tell them, if you show up to fly and you don't have 2 or 3 questions written down, ready to ask me, we're not flying until you come up with some questions. And it could be something silly, but I let them quiz me. I let them play Stump the DPE, right there at the airplane. Ask me something, ask a question. But they get the idea pretty quick that they need to be doing their homework and showing up with questions, because having questions is an indicator that you're digging. You're not just reading you're not just making note cards, you're not just watching videos, but you're digging. And when you dig, I guarantee you, you will find questions that you don't necessarily know the answer to. And that's what your flight instructor is there to help you with. So little soapbox there for you. All right, back to the chart just real quick.
Jim, real quick from me. I just wanted to thank you for doing all of these. I needed to go somewhere at 4
Oh, you got to go. Okay, I am going a little bit long. So
I'm going to make you the host. And again, thank you for doing these. They've been very helpful, and it's been fun kind of co-hosting them here with you. So goodbye, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you around.
Thank you. We appreciate that, Carl. And yep, I am still recording. That's looking good. So we're probably only going to go a few more minutes. Raj, are you good to hang in there? Give me a thumbs up if you are. Okay. Just so you can watch the chat for me, because I'm not even looking at it, I'm going to make you the host. And now you can mute and unmute people and keep an eye on the chat for me. So not real often, but sometimes I found that there's confusion between people understanding the difference between center and flight service. And I think the reason for that, this is something I've seen just recently. So many people are using their iPads now, which is wonderful. You can do so much with an app like ForeFlight that, and we've heard the numbers have significantly decreased. People don't call flight service anymore. People aren't calling for a weather briefing. People aren't calling to open and close flight plans. You can do everything from the iPad now. As long as you have internet in the cockpit, you can do it all. So that has led some of the newer pilots, private instrument check rides, I've noticed, they kind of understand the definitions. You can tell they were taught it in ground school or they read it in a book, but they have literally, you know, here they are on an instrument check ride. They've literally never talked to flight service on the phone or on the radio, which to me, as an old timer, if I can call myself that, you know, someone who's been flying over 25 years, that's kind of sad, you know, because I grew up talking to flight service. They're kind of like my other friends, you know. So make sure you at least, you know, I would recommend all instructors, just call them up, ask for the local altimeter setting, you know, do something trivial just so that pilots aren't scared to talk to them, because they're very friendly people. And related to that is, and we still have these all over the country, but especially here in Arizona, I think you see them more maybe where there's mountainous area where VHF frequencies don't travel as well, or maybe wide open areas where the VORs or the RCOs, remote communication outlets, are far apart. But you have something like this where it says 122.1R. And the check ride question is, what's the R mean? And the answer I get the most of the time is, oh, that's, you know, you're talking to Prescott radio, you're talking to flight service, and you receive on this frequency and you transmit on the VOR. And I'm like, really? And I'll usually point to the poster on the wall and be like, show me how you would set up the radios to transmit on 110.6. And they're like, oh, you just put it in your number one radio. I'm like, really? Have you ever tried doing that? Because guess what? You can't. It doesn't go to those frequencies. So, you know, like I said, do it once and it's no big deal. You can see where the confusion is. Those of you who know, it's because the books and the videos say that the R means receive only. Yes, it means that flight service receives on 122.1. The pilot receives on 110.6, meaning we listen on the VOR and we transmit on the frequency that has the R, because they receive us. Once you understand that, it's no big deal. Once you go out and do it one time, like I said, just ask for an altimeter setting or ask them for an updated METAR or TAF at the local airport. Even if you don't need the information, just do it once and you'll never forget how to do it. It's not that big of a deal. Another common error with that instructors will see when you start doing this is people just put in the frequency and they start talking. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't start talking on this frequency until you hear the Morse code. Because if you don't hear the Morse code, you're not going to hear the voice of the person either. So depending on what kind of avionics setup you have, usually there's a button you need to push or a knob you need to pull in order to hear the Morse code. Then you can go ahead and call. There's another tip, and that is when you call, you don't need to tell them that you're transmitting on 122.1. They don't care what you're transmitting on. They need to know which button to push. You know, they've got this 1970s technology, I imagine, I don't know. But they've got something in front of them where they need to push a button to know which transmitter they need to talk to you on. So the example would be Prescott Radio, this is Cessna 12345, listening on the Buckeye VOR 110.6 with request. And then you be quiet. They have all the information they need. They might be busy on a different frequency, so you just wait. You don't want to just start talking a lot. Just tell them you have a request, and then they'll come back and might take them a minute, you know, to get to you. And they'll say, aircraft on the Buckeye VOR, go ahead with your request. And then you can repeat your call sign, go ahead with your request. It's really no big deal once you've done it. Let's see real quick. Knowing the difference between the Victor Airways and the Tango routes, those are becoming a lot more common between the blue and the black. Knowing what a bypass route is, we have one right here where you can see the blue goes around a Vona intersection. There's a previous discussion. Is it a fix? Is it a waypoint? Is it an intersection? I don't know. I use the words interchangeably. So this fix right here, or this waypoint, a Vona, is part of Victor 16 because it's black, but it's not part of Tango 306 because the blue Tango route is going around it. All that means is that when you load Tango 306 in your fancy GPS and you look at the flight plan, you will not see a Vona intersection. But if you load Victor 16, you will. That's all that it means. It's nothing big deal. It doesn't change the way you fly through there. I did have one applicant one time that told me he would turn and fly around it. And yeah, we had to talk to the instructor about that one. So I see everyone laughing. So, all right, we're out of time. We do try to keep these close to an hour. Thank you everyone for hanging in there. I'm happy to go a few more minutes. If you guys have a specific question, go ahead and throw a note in the chat. And actually, I think the way we have it set today, you guys can unmute yourselves. But did you have anything, Raj, or you see anything coming in?
Yes, there is one question. There is, Dan has a question, and I also have one for you if you want to stay longer.
Sure. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. Just for context, I'm just starting my instrument training, so I haven't done any hours yet in flight time, but just, you know, doing personal study, ground school, that sort of thing. And trying to understand the 5 T's, you know, time, turn, throttle, twist, talk. My research has shown that, you know, the order depends on kind of who you talk to, and the order also kind of depends on the situation that you're in, as I understand it. So I'm just curious, you know, on a check ride, would a DPE expect you to do that in a specific certain order, or kind of contextually, or what would your kind of handle that as a response?
So I certainly can't speak for other DPs. For myself, I would say, well, from the training I've received from the FAA, I will give you a somewhat authoritative answer and tell you that if there is a DP out there that gives anyone a hard time about the order they do those in, they are overstepping their bounds, because there is nothing in the regulations, the AIM, or the ACS that specifically says what order those have to be in, and those are the standards set by the FAA, okay? So there's your official answer, is it's okay. But there's another level to that. As with all things, it depends on the scenario. I'm a fan of the 5 T's. The way I learned it is the way I teach it, which is the most common one that I've seen out there, which is turn, time, twist, throttle, talk. And I'm sure, well, so I've been pretty busy the last couple of days. I told you I got back to check rides. I did see your post online. I wanted to reply. I was on my way to a meeting and I didn't get around to it. So I'm glad you came today so we could talk about it. Because at least when I got in my car and started driving, I did have a few thoughts about it, and appreciate the question. So any procedure like that, where it's an acronym or a memory aid or something, one of the things that, well, the way to kind of structure it in your mind is to look at the purpose and to prioritize the importance of these different aspects. And I would suggest that doing it consistently the same every time is one of the highest priorities, meaning I would put very high value on standardization and consistency. So the comment you made of it depends on the situation, I don't necessarily agree with that. Whatever way you choose to do, stick with it, because trying to think, is this flavor, you know, red or flavor blue today? It's like, you know what, just do the 5 T's and do it the same every time, and that's how you want to do it. That being said, for anyone else, maybe we should say a little more. We're talking about reaching a holding, fix, or clearance limit. Specifically, some instructors teach it every time you hit a fix or a waypoint, you should do the 5 T's. Usually that's overkill. What I teach is as a minimum, do it when you enter a hold. So you enter a hold, you come over, let's just say it's a VOR, could be a waypoint, GPS, whatever. And as you enter the hold, you turn to the correct heading, you start the time for the clock. Usually for what we're doing, it's a 1 minute leg before the next turn, depending on the kind of entry. Turn time twist, you twist the OBS or the CDI to the inbound course. Throttle, you check your speed, which should have already been set within 3 minutes of reaching the hold. So throttle is really a double check. And I also teach, that's a time to double check your engine instruments, make sure everything's good. And then talk is a required report to ATC, which you will find in the Aeronautical Information Manual 5-3-3. You can be impressed I have that memorized. I used to fly a plane that was 533 Bravo Mike, so that one just stuck for some reason. But 533 in the AIM is required reports. And it says when reaching a holding fix or clearance limit, whether you're in radar contact or not, you are to report the time and altitude. A lot of people miss the time on that one. A lot of them will practice reporting the altitude, but you are supposed to report the time. Zulu is best. If I didn't have a clock in front of me with Zulu, I would just glance at my clock. Right now, I'd say it's 14 minutes past the hour. So, Albuquerque Center, Cessna 12345, entering the hold over Stanfield at 5,000, 14 minutes past the hour. There you go, time and altitude. So that's turn, time, twist, throttle, talk. Other versions will add other things. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of any because I don't teach those, but you've seen them. Do a search. All kinds of variations. So standardization, high priority. The reason I don't think it makes a big difference whether you flip them around is you're going to go through them all within a short enough amount of time that it doesn't really matter. In fact, I've seen some people get into trouble. Imagine, and I know you're just starting your training, but maybe this will make more sense when you come back later. But if you're doing something like a teardrop or a parallel hold entry where you cross the VOR and then you start the clock for 1 minute before your next turn, if you have any headwind at all and you start that clock right away and you turn it exactly 1 minute, you actually might be turning too soon because you were entering the hold with a headwind that's slowing down your ground speed. So I think turning the airplane first is the best thing to do. So turn first, wait until you're done with the turn, wings level, then casually reach over, start the clock. And I know some people will argue, oh, you got to get that clock going, so it's time turn twist. Like, no, you don't, okay? It's not that critical. I think it's more important, let's turn the airplane, get it going the correct direction, then casually start the clock. Everything should be nice and slow and methodical. So anyone who's arguing that the order is all that important, I think they just need to, lighten up on the coffee, settle down a little bit. It's going to be okay. So, all right. Send all the emails to Dan Sobzak. So I'm just kidding. You can send me hate mail. That's okay. Anyway, does that answer what kind of help? So I know you posted that online. Did anyone have any compelling arguments along those same lines or otherwise?
Not really, just a couple of slight variations like you're saying, but it really kind of echoed what you're saying. It just kind of depends on, get those first couple of things right away. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Very good. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, this was a good session. Any final questions come in, Rars?
I have a minor one with ATC. When I fly this light sport, this Remos aircraft, most ATC controllers don't usually see it around. So I end up calling them as Remos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, request fly following or something of that sort. And what I hear back is November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, squawk, blah, blah, blah. So now I have this dilemma. What should I call back? Should I keep saying Remos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or should I go like them, November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Good question. So I don't know if anyone's pointed it out to you, Rars, but you do have a little bit of an accent. And I think that's part of the equation. Them being unfamiliar with the airplane, you're right. That I'm sure that's also a big part of it. But between the unfamiliarity and your beautiful accent, they're probably like, what did he say? And they just come back with November. If I were you, I would just stick with Remos. And if you're getting flight following, they may come back and say your type. Do you know what the identifier is? Like, what would you put on a flight plan for that airplane?
Yes, it's the type is Golf X-ray, and you're right. They ask me every time.
There you go. So Golf X-ray. So you're doing everything right. I would say keep doing it right. If they want to keep saying November, they're allowed to do that. I don't know of anything. You know, we know the whole discussion about shortening a call sign. You know, once they shorten it, then you should shorten it too, or you can if you want to. You know, that whole thing. But that's a different topic. The guidance on radio calls is to use your model type and your number. Minus the November, you know, unless you need to, you know, there's some airplanes that are just like November 3 Golf Bravo, you know, that's their whole call sign. And so sometimes it's good to say the November so they know they're getting the whole thing, not just the last three. No, I think you're doing it right. Just, you know, talk nice and slow, try to enunciate. And once they ask you for the type and you tell them Golf X-ray or whatever it was, my understanding is that most modern ATC facilities, once they type that in, it pops up and they know that you're a Remos. And I think they will see the word Remos on their display, but I don't know that for sure. If any controllers are watching this on YouTube, watching the recording, please drop a note down in the comments. Love to know what exactly you guys see once you put in that type code. But no, good question. Don't really know for sure, but I think, yeah, just my opinion. I would do what you're doing and be patient with them. They're only human. So cool. All right. Well, I think we're good. Thanks for hanging in there with us live, guys. This is a little bit extra long session, but that's okay because at least for a while, it's probably going to be our last one. I'm getting back to work. Everyone be safe out there. Remember to please wear a mask in public, in the cockpit. Remember, regardless of your personal political views or who you choose to believe, because I'm telling you right now, whichever way you want to believe this whole coronavirus thing, you will find people that agree with you. And it's kind of unfortunate that we're polarized as a society, but just know that there's a lot of people out there that believe we all should be wearing masks right now when we're in public. And I think it's being respectful to them, whether you agree or not. It sounds like a lot of states are starting to make it mandatory. Airports have made it mandatory. Certainly when we're sitting in a cockpit, I think it's smart. And with that, just a little plug there to keep everyone happy, hopefully working happily together. But yeah, thanks again for being here, and fly safe out there, and we'll see you guys out on the interwebs. Take care.